Only, you know, like almost 12 hours late. That's normal and okay, right? Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I am very late uploading, and I do have a reason. So I wanted to do a video and just trying out, because I've heard some other people that have done this, where they will just, you know, read the first chapter of several books and then kind of pick what they want to do. That's not normally something I do. I usually just grab a book and go with it, but I decided to try it out because I've still been kind of not really doing much of a TBR, and there were several things I wanted to try out. But the BookTube spin list came out earlier today, so I wanted to include those books, whatever they ended up being, in this when I did it. So that's why you're getting a super late video for your Wednesday video. Now, I did this for 5 books. I read the first chapter mostly. I'll explain that when we get to that one. But let's get it started. I'm just going to talk about what the book is, and then talk about kind of briefly what it's about and what I gleaned from the first chapter, and then determine which one I actually want to read. I've read them all, but I haven't overly thought about which one, so when I am going through, we'll see where it goes. So the first one is called The Bane of All Things, and it's by Leo Valaket. I'm assuming I'm saying that correctly, but it could be wrong. This is actually an e-arc that I have, and I've had this one for a little bit, but I haven't read it yet just because it doesn't come out until I think late in November. So I have some time yet to get to it. But this one actually started with, it had like a brief, it had like kind of an introduction, and then it had kind of like the history of the land that had happened, and was explaining some of the geography and some of like the wars and like powers that had risen up. So I did read that, and I almost am like, should I just read that and not the first chapter? But I tried the first chapter too. But so basically we have this land, and it sounds like this is going to involve quite a bit of landmass, because we have an area in the west, we have the far east, we have southern and northern, like different lands and areas, and so this seems like this is a pretty big scope. But basically, many years ago, I think maybe thousands, now I can't quite recall, but there were gods that were warring. They were like the children of even bigger gods, and they warred, and there's been all kinds of different powers. There's apparently like a magical sword that's called the Bane of the Gods, which is relevant, and apparently it may become the bane of everything and doom the world for eternity. So this is kind of like the idea I get. So the West, which is where chapter 1 is completely controlled by the Holy Clerisy. But also, it's like, from reading the other bits, like religion itself is specifically outlawed, so I'm not really sure how this is going to work out. But the open, we get all that kind of info dump at the beginning, and then it opens to, we have a disgraced officer, Rin, who we're not entirely sure what's happened to him, but he's being brought to the Claw, which is apparently sort of like a prison, but sort of not. And it's kind of unclear. And then he meets a woman, Jocelyn, who's also a prisoner being taken there, who's apparently cursed. And through the interactions here, we get a little bit more info dump. So really, it was mostly info dump, not a lot actually happening yet, and despite all the info, not a lot explaining. So it seemed interesting, but this seems like one that you really are going to have to just go and just get into, because of the fact that it seems like it's trying to do a ton of setup so that it can just run with the story. So this one, I feel like, I don't know, from the first chapter, wasn't really enough to tell me if I'm going to like this or not, and I'll have to keep reading at some point in order to really determine. Now, the second book that I had in there was Mordu by Speedy, and my immediate reaction was, what the hell did I just read? So this sounded interesting, and it sounded like it was going to be this really dark, creepy, weird type of fantasy book, and it definitely has lived up to that. But this also had like a little introduction when I was looking at it. It does mention too, like in the little introduction, that it has a glossary. But basically, if you look at things in the glossary, you might find out more than the main character knows. And some other weird things. And then it literally it does have a character list too, which is kind of interesting. Some of them are really specific too. And so I didn't read all of them. But if I do choose this one, I'm definitely going to go back and read them, because like even the descriptions or something. And then there's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 pages that it says, it starts with, additionally, in the pages of this book, you will find many unusual things, including, but not limited to, and then it literally has 5 pages of line after line of things that are apparently in this book, including, I'm going to grab a few at random, an angry peacock in a cage, a family of elephants unfamiliarly labeled, litter bearers in the Roman style, a road forged from glass, a telescope. Those are some of the things that are included in this book. So already just strange. And like I would definitely go back and read them just because it's strange. But then I get to chapter 1 and it just gets weirder. This very much is a book, and I kind of got the idea from the way it starts. It's probably going to be quite confusing off the bat, and that's why he is kind of providing some information up front. But it just kind of goes with it. Because we start, and I knew the plot of this was basically, it's Mordu is like a city that's built on the corpse of a dead god. And apparently there's like living mud that people go in to try to like find things to sell. And it was really non-specific, and it kept mentioning that our main character is looking for a fluke. And I think his name is Nathan. I don't know how, I've already forgotten that. But yeah, Nathan is the main character, and he's a young boy. He's looking for a fluke. It doesn't really specify what that is, but it's just kind of like the weird imagery explaining what's going on in the city. There's like a master of the city, and apparently like families will sell their children to the master to find work, or like other younger kids will go and dig in the living mud. And Nathan apparently has some sort of like magic and can create a fluke out of the living mud. And so he gets one, and he picks up this thing out of the mud, and it's like a basically blob with the limbs of infants all around it that's like wriggling around. And it was freaking weird. I don't really know. This was really strange, and that's the what the hell did I just read is really what stuck out to me. It was so strange. So strange, which is kind of what I expected, and it was even stranger than I expected. Anyway, moving on to the second BookTube spin pick. That was the first. I don't know if I said that. That is Spine of the Dragon by Kevin J. Anderson. So this one is supposed to be, I've looked at it, and it confirmed in the first chapter, since I mentioned it the other day in the spin video, but this one's about basically there's this ancient beings called the Wrath, who are kind of like human-like, but not, and they actually created humanity to use as slaves, and they were trying to like kill the dragon at the center of the world for their god, but they ended up exterminating each other. They've been gone for 1,000 years or so, and then suddenly they come back. And the first chapter was following King Aiden in his city that apparently borders a desert, and there's like a really bad dust storm coming, and he's just like going around making sure all the people know he cares about them. And there was a lot of exposition done in, just to be honest, a pretty clumsy way, starting with this, like telling us, very much none of it was showing, it was all just telling us things, including some like odd comments to find out that his wife is pregnant, and just the way he's describing his wife, and the way he's described, where we're just supposed to know he's just a super good guy, and he wants to be better, and it just felt weird. It really felt like a debut, and like a new author struggling to figure out how to start a book. And I know Kevin J. Anderson's not a new author, so I'm not really sure why it felt like that, but it just did. There were some bits, like parts of the story felt almost Sanderson-esque, but just not as good as Sanderson. I could see parts of what happened in the first chapter in a Sanderson book. Sanderson has actually had some things that were similar. It was also, we have the dust storm, and then there's a type of like bird called the ska, and so immediately I'm thinking Mistborn, and then there's some other Sandersonian things, but honestly, this felt really clumsy, and I was not impressed. The plot, like the premise, is super interesting to me, and plus this was a BookTube spin pick, so I definitely will be continuing this, but I can already tell you this is not the one I'm picking to read right now, because it seemed kind of clumsy, and I was definitely not impressed with the first chapter. Next up, we have the Dark Angel Trilogy by Meredith and Pierce. This is a trilogy, and it's not that long. None of the books are super long. But it is something I had randomly picked up, and I had read the first half of the premise. That's important, which is talking about, like, there's these people who are on the moon, because the moon had been colonized, and the people there ended up, like, they creating new life on the moon, including, like, some fantasy creatures. And so I'm thinking this is going to be, like, this weird sci-fantasy type thing. After reading the first chapter, I was confused, and so I read the rest of the description, continued on the back flap, and this probably is not what I thought it was going to be. So we open up, we're following Ariel and Eowyn, and Eowyn is like a noble, basically, related to a satrap. So, Andrew, if you see this part, that's just for you. I found the word satrap used as a noble title in another book besides The Lifeship Traders. So she's like looking for these weird flowers with her like bond servant who is Ariel, and the flowers like have a weird, like, I guess something that it's kind of like liquor and intoxicant. They're collecting them while talking about, they were told all these stories about dark angels, which apparently are like vampires basically, but they have actual wings. And then she gets taken by one. At this point I was confused because this is not what I was expecting. And so, I like I said, I read the back, and apparently this is about a dark angel who was born human, and in order to, like, appease his mother and or become fully non-human, he has to bring her 15 maidens who become his wives, and I'm not really sure. So then I looked up some reviews on Goodreads on it, and there were several that were like, this is what Twilight wishes it could be, and that really made me worried. So, I'm not giving up on this, but I was expecting a very different book than what I think I'm going to get here, so I'll have to continue that to see what ends up coming of it. And then finally, the last book I did was Bloodsong. Now this is where I said I kind of read the first chapter of everything, because this book opens up with the account from a historian talking about the main character, Valen. It's like taking place very much later in his life, where he's already done all the things that I assume the book and or series are going to be about. And he's like a prisoner and is supposed to be put to death or something. But it was decently long. I think it was like 10 pages. And then I looked and the first chapter was like 20 pages. So I didn't want to have to read all of that, especially because this is the last one I was getting to. So I didn't. I just read the account that sets up the story. But it seems like it's basically setting up, we're going to follow Valen and see all of the things in his life that ended out. It definitely did pique my interest, but not quite as hard as I expected it to, just because of how much both Andrew and Walker have praised this. So this is absolutely still a book that I'm reading. But as I'm talking about it now especially, I'm just realizing and talking about more of them. Out of the 5 books I've talked about, there's definitely one I feel like that piqued my interest the most. I definitely think I'm going to go with Mordu. This was just super weird, like I said, and I feel like I have to keep reading to figure out what the hell is going on. So, it's official. Now, as of recording this video, it's taken me 13 minutes, but Mordu I think is what I'm going to read next. I will still be reading both Spine of the Dragon, probably all of these, maybe not necessarily right now. Spine of the Dragon I'll probably wait until later, because for BookTube Spin you do get the rest of the year to read it. So that one's probably going to wait, because it was definitely bumped. Bloodsong I'm definitely going to read this month, just because I'm really excited to read it. Dark Angel Trilogy, I don't know. I'm less excited to read it, but it's like I said, this is a trilogy. It's a smaller book. I mean, all 3 of them were less than 500 pages combined, so I'll probably at least try to read the first one, see if I like it, if it gets better, and go from there. Because it wasn't bad, I just don't think it's a story that's for me, based off what I had read. So I should specify that with it, because I don't think it's going to be a story that I will enjoy, but it was really well written, and it was interesting. It was just kind of odd. So I want to give it a good shot so I can at least confirm that, like, hey, this is well written, but this is not the type of thing I want to read, versus I don't like this. And like I said, too, with Spine of the Dragon, even, I was not impressed with the first chapter, but I'm definitely interested enough to continue. I also already have the second book, so I definitely want to see and hope it gets better. Bloodsong, I am already sure that I'm going to love, and that's why I was so surprised that that's not the one that I ended up picking. But as I was describing it, it was interesting. I don't even think I talked about it a ton, but it was mostly just kind of telling the story of them, and basically like Valen getting ready to tell his story. So I probably should have read the first chapter of it, and that probably would have hooked me, but I didn't want to have to read 30 pages and then go film this video, so I didn't. And Mordu wins. So that's the book that I'm going to be reading. This was kind of interesting to do. Let me know if this is something that you actually would like to see, talking about different books in the first chapter. I feel like it would be kind of fun to do this as like a live stream, maybe like a combo reading sprint, we're, you know, reading the first chapter of several books and then go into the talk portion and people can, like, I'll talk about what I read and people can vote or something. That could be interesting. So let me know if that's something you would like to see, because I might try it again at some point. Of course, give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Make sure to check the link in the description for the Wizardly Duo Discord. If you want to join us, chat about books, anything else, it's always a lot of fun there in the Discord. And of course, if you'd like to see more of my content, make sure to subscribe.